Is this Sudan's version of the Arab Spring? President Omar Al-Bashir says protesters demanding an end to his 29-year rule are traitors. After a week of food and fuel price protests, he's pledging what he calls real reforms. Will they be enough to save him? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. The soaring price of bread and fuel was the spark for the outrage. Now, Sudan's president is in the firing line, with Omar Al-Bashir facing growing demands to end his 29-year rule. Riot police fired bullets and tear gas to disperse crowds marching towards his presidential palace on Tuesday. The government says 12 people have been killed in 8 days of protests. Amnesty International thinks the total could be at least 37. The president's promising reforms to improve living standards and accuses protesters of being traitors.
Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for your support and enthusiasm, which is a response to every foreign agent, traitor, outlaw and destructive person. You are the ones responding to them right now. From here, you are responding to all the traitors and foreign agents. I support you, and with your support, I will be back here next year.
Our reporter Hiba Morgan has the latest from Khartoum.
Life may seem normal today in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, but yesterday the city was at a standstill. Thousands of people came out into the streets and marched protesting against President Bashir and his 29-year rule. They were trying to make their way to the presidential palace to submit a memo to request that he step down and pave way for a new government, new faces. It all started with an economic protest in the city of Atbara last Wednesday, but that quickly escalated into a political protest. People were chanting slogans like, "Down with the government, we want a new regime, we want to topple the current regime." Police responded using tear gas and live ammunition. President Bashir said he's going to try to introduce new policies and new reforms to improve the economy for the people. But the people protesting said they've been there before, that they've heard these promises. The only thing they want new is a new government and a new regime. Amnesty International says 37 people have been killed before yesterday's protest. Now, with the police using tear gas and live ammunition, there are concerns that the number of people who have died during the protest will increase. We've already heard reports of people injured during the protest, people who have sustained bullet injuries and were hospitalized, some of them in critical conditions. It's not clear where these protests will end. The people are saying that the only thing they want is the president to go. And the president said he is not going to step down, but he will try to introduce new reforms. So at the moment, Sudan is at a crossroads between the protesters who are saying that they want a new government and a president who is defiant and wants to stand hanging on to power. Hiba Morgan for Inside Story.
All right, let's bring in our panel. Joining us on Skype from Norwich, Sara Abdelgalil, President of the Sudan Doctors Association in the United Kingdom. From Khartoum, Hafiz Mohammed, Director of Justice Africa. And from Agadir, on Skype, Hajooj Kuka, a member of GIRIFNA, a nonviolent resistance movement in Sudan. Welcome to the program. Hajooj, let me start with you. So President Al-Bashir first is promising real reforms, and then he's calling these protesters traitors. What does that say to you about what he will be willing to do going forward?
I mean, at this point, especially with yesterday, like, we're coming out of this great high. This was the best, the strongest nonviolent protest we had ever. And we're really excited. So at this point, we don't even want to hear from President Omar Al-Bashir, and we know that he has nothing to offer us. So at this point, we just want him gone, and we want to talk about what is next.
Hafiz, this all began, of course, with protesters enraged over the price of fuel and bread. Are you surprised that this has gone on, that these protesters have taken the kind of shape that they have, and that now protesters are demanding the resignation of President Al-Bashir?
Yeah, I think this is a accumulation of problems which is many Sudanese have facing for a very long time. You know, this regime have been in power for 30 years. And to end up with the current problems, which is, it seems to be economical, which is lack of bread, problem of fuel, hyperinflation. But that is the manifestation of the deep problem, which is the underlying cause is a political problem. And it's the manifestation of problem and failure to run the country for a long time. I think it's blaming others for the crisis, I don't think it's acceptable. And this theory of conspiracy, I don't think anyone will buy it, because you've been in power for 30 years. It is your responsibility, and everyone is asking you. And these people are not alien, they are not agents, they are Sudanese who actually feel the pain of the policies which has been going on, and also the failure to run the country. Sudan is a rich country, but is not being administered in the right way. That is why the result is the suffering of the people, and this is why people are coming out, not because they are belonging to a political party, but because the Sudanese are suffering. They need dignity, they need to live their life as they're supposed to be. And we don't see, so that is a problem. I think the government have to face its responsibility and towards the people, and not to try and resort to excuses which is no one is going to buy them.
Sara, just how violent is the situation on the ground right now? I mean, could you give our viewers a snapshot as far as what you're hearing from your team members regarding what's going on?
First of all, thank you very much for giving us this chance to participate in the program. And on behalf of the Sudanese diaspora in the UK, we are very proud of the people of Sudan. And unfortunately, 37 lives were lost. From the ground and from my colleagues in the medical sector, we are aware that people yesterday faced a very excessive aggression, and there has been a lot of casualties. There was directed force towards hitting, peaceful demonstrators on their heads, or direct live bullets towards the neck or the chest. For example, we have a surgical registrar yesterday was took urgently to theater for exploration, and a bullet was removed. It seems like the casualties are increasing whenever people took to the street, and it's worrying that there are different groups, not only the army, not only the police, but militias and snipers, and people are very worried about the extent of this aggression from the government to protect itself rather than handing the power peacefully. We are now aware that there is a young gentleman who is he had a significant head injury, and we are expecting to lose him at any time. There is another as well, I would call him a child, less than the age of 18, who had an injury to his spine, and I was told that possibly he will develop paralysis. So it's very significant injuries, significant casualties towards peaceful protesters.
Hajooj, I mean, is there any possibility at this stage that protesters would accept anything less than the resignation of President al-Bashir? And also, do you foresee any kind of political compromise being a possibility?
No, not at all. I mean, the thing about these protests, they're not initiated by the opposition party. And those are the ones who might sit with the government and have a negotiation. And they've been trying to do that for a long time. These protests are by people who are not, most of them are non-political. So they were not going to be okay with another government being done with the oppositions or anything like that. So the whole idea is Omar Al-Bashir needs to go, and this government, the National Congress Party, needs to go. And what happened is, because of what happened in Adbara on the 19th and what happened on the 25th yesterday, people feel power. So at this point, people are very powerful, and they think they have the power to get rid of al-Bashir. And there's all these talks about Friday there's going to be big protests, and on the New Year's, that's going to be the end. We're going to be celebrating the end of this regime on New Year, and that'll be the strongest protest we're going to have.
Hajooj, if I could just pick up on one of the points you're making. I mean, you're saying that it's just people that are behind these protests, and certainly it seems as though it started that way. On Tuesday, the protest, at least partially, was organized by the Sudanese Professionals Association, which is an umbrella coalition for professional unions. So what I'm wondering is, does this suggest to you that the opposition could potentially position themselves to capitalize politically on the anger that's being expressed from the protesters?
I mean, being from a nonviolent group, we know that in the end, when you have democracy, the people who are going to rule are political parties. So the political parties have to decide now, do they want to align themselves with the people, or do they want to align themselves with this government? And what we're seeing is they're actually, from their calls, they're all aligning themselves with the people. So all the opposition parties withdrew from the government who were part of it and are now aligning themselves with the people, but they're not leading the streets yet, which is very important. So what we have right now is leadership that's coming from a whole group of people, a big variety of people, and groups that are like from the professionals that led the protest or called for the protest yesterday. So although they called for the protest, the leadership was from among a vast majority of different groups of resistance movements that have been, and civil society that have been fighting this government for years.
Hafiz, Hajooj was talking about how these protests began in Atbara and how significant that was. So I want to ask you, what led to that expression of anger and frustration coming out into the streets in Atbara?
Yeah, I think it's mainly because of the hardship which these people are facing, because of lack of bread, lack of commodities. But at the end of the day, what caused this is political issue. It's at the end, it's a political, yes, because good economics, politics is economic is politics, and good economics is good politics. And it's clearly people are frustrated because this shortage of fuel and bread is been going on for a very long time. And I think people have had enough of actually, and at the end of the day, it's the government which is supposed to run the country, is supposed to provide this type of services to people. For the government to wash its hand away of this and not to act, definitely people will come out. Yes, they come out protesting because they feel the pain, but at the end of the day, it's the momentum build up and it's ended the way it is. And I'm sure it's going, the problem is going to stay, and if the problem is there, the protest is not going to end. And the important question is this government now have a solution for these problems? I don't think so, because I think the whole system is not functioning to the interest of the people, and that is what needs to be changed. It's not only changing the president. I think the whole system is not fit for purpose, and it needs to be changed to serve the Sudanese people and not to serve certain amount of people, and also to engage them, because Sudan is multi-ethnic, multi-diverse, and it needs all the Sudanese to come together and to try and agree on how to rule their country. That is the most important issue now.
Sara, how concerned are you right now that the violence will get worse, that the tensions will escalate? Where do you see all this going?
We are very, very concerned because the Sudan government at the moment is, there is no government, but they don't want to hand the power gracefully, and they don't want to give up. And they're going to use different tools to try to stick to the power. Can be different. There can be different tools to do it. We know that we have a lot of people detained, more than 100 yesterday. They can be tortured physically and psychologically. We know that, as I said, there has been a lot of violence towards peaceful demonstrators on the streets. We are very concerned that the casualties will increase, and the death of individuals as doctors, in the diaspora and inside in Sudan. We are trying to help by arranging the emergency unit for resuscitation as much as we can. However, we think there is a role there for international communities and for sort of diplomatic groups in Sudan that they have to put pressure for the government to allow the people of Sudan to practice their right. So to march, to hand over a petition to release the detainees as soon as possible. And we would like to make it very clear that we don't want a repetition to what happened in 2013 when more than 200 people were killed. This is, was a massacre, and we don't want this massacre to be repeated once again.
Hafiz, you may have just heard Sara talking about the need for support from outside and also from inside Sudan to try to come up with a solution to all this. Let me ask you, do you think that any other countries would try to intervene to come up with a diplomatic solution to what's going on in Sudan right now?
Already the international community is engaging through the mediation of the African Union, the High Implementation Panel and others. But I think at the end of the day, it's for Sudanese. If there is a political will among Sudanese, then we can reach a solution. But the problem is, the question is, the NCP is ready to engage seriously to actually move the country forward and agree on how this country is going to be governed and ruled by all Sudanese. That is the question which is remain to be seen. They orchestrated the so-called national dialogue, and which is ended with nothing. And the recommendation is not being implemented, and nothing happened. And now I think the Sudanese have to agree on how to govern their country. Yes, we need the support of the international community, but at the end of the day, it's the Sudanese. They have to address that. They have to agree on how to move things forward and how to work together to save the country from actually the brink of collapse and bankruptcy. I think that is what we need to do as a Sudanese, and we need the help of our friends from the international community. Their help is vital for the process of rebuilding the country. But at the end of the day, we need the political will from all the parties to do it. And if you ask me now whether the NCP is ready to do that, I don't think so. I think they want to address political and economic problem by security and police means, and that will never work. And I think people have to learn from history that will never work.
Hajooj, do you believe that President al-Bashir would ever agree to stepping down? And beyond that, is there any kind of mechanism that exists in which he could be removed from power in Sudan?
I don't think he'll step down. I think he has to be forced to step down. I think Omar Al-Bashir is so disconnected from what's happening on the ground. He has in his head, he's been a dictator for 30 years, and we've seen other dictators like Mugabe. Like he's never going to get to the point where like, I need to go. He always has this fictitious thing in his head where he's like the father figure saving his kids, and we don't know better. So I don't think he's going to go. He has to be forced to leave.
Okay, let me ask you this. How would he be forced to step down? How do you envision that scenario playing out? And also, where does the military stand in all this? Because there have been reports that the military has publicly expressed support for Omar al-Bashir. So where does that stand right now?
So Sudan is a country where this is where genocide happened, yeah, in Darfur. This is where the war in Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile is going on. This is where we had a lot of atrocities, being the 200 people being killed in protests in 2013. So this is a country where we have this group called the Rapid Response Force, which they're not really part of the military. They're not really part of there's this militia that are just right under Omar al-Bashir. And yesterday, they actually got all their troops and said a speech that was against corruption and against what's happening economically, and they wanted answers. So the army in Sudan is not controlled by one people. Because of these militia groups, we don't know who controls them. So right now, although some people in the army said they're behind Omar al-Bashir, others were not. And so we expect the army to fight among each other, which we don't really want. What we really want is for the army to step aside and allow us to protest to the point of toppling the regime. And I think the way for that to happen is to continue on the street and to have that force and to have the opposition parties uniting for this one thing, which is toppling Omar al-Bashir, his regime, NCP, and all of them. And at the same time, for media to cover us, like Al Jazeera is doing right now, and other media to come up and cover us really as a revolution, not as this red, hungry people, African old narrative of we just need to eat. And I think that's what's going to get him to the point where he's going to be removed. And he's going to be removed by maybe the army, which normally happens. And right now, his only protecting force is the national security and the police. And the police step aside in more than one city. And the national security, they're our biggest enemy right now on the ground. And they're the ones who are committing the atrocities and actually shooting people, snipers and whatnot. Mm-hmm. We're hoping the army would step aside, but hopefully not fight each other, which would be the worst case scenario.
Sara, there are calls now for a general strike by doctors. From your perspective, what would that do with regard to the overall situation and how everything is playing out?
The strike by the doctors have started 2 days ago. It is a strike from cold cases. And it's a step forward, an escalation to weaken the regime more. We are expecting other professionals to join in the strike and build up the momentum, and that is to paralyze the government, hoping that that will help in the handover of the power. What we hope for, that this will happen peacefully without, further casualties and without further injuries. But we need support from all different parties. I just would like just to say that it is not, and it has never been about bread and petrol. It is an intifada. It's a revolution, and there is no way for us to step back. We are going to move forward. And hopefully that coming together, professionals, political parties, youth, that will lead to the ultimate goal of the handover of the power.
Hafiz, last year the U.S. ended 2 decades of sanctions that President al-Bashir had long blamed for the country's economic isolation and the poverty there. When that happened, that was supposed to mean new investment in Sudan. That was supposed to mean economic upturn. That didn't happen. Why?
I think that's what we've been saying all the time. The problem is not the sanction. And the problem in Sudan, the economic problem, is not because of any foreign conspiracy. It's because of the way the economy is being run. It's mismanagement of the economy, because the country is not run in the correct way. That is the problem. It's not, and it is clear. Now the sanctions have been removed for almost around 2 years, and still the problem is actually getting worse and worse and worse. And it's going to get, the issue is what we need. This is a political problem. And the political problem, we need to address the political issue first. If we don't address the political issue, if you don't restructure this country so it can function properly to save the country and save the economy, then it is not going to be resolved at all. And it is clear now, they remove the sanctions and they have no one to blame apart from themselves. If you've been for 30 years in power, and this country is so rich with resources, we have more than 10 years of oil resources, we wasted that. We have a very huge volatile land, rain irrigated, and we have Jazeera scheme which is being destroyed, and we have all the economic infrastructure of the economy of the country is destroyed. This country needs huge investment inside. But before that, we have to fix the politics of it. If we don't, then the economy is not going to be fixed.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We have run out of time. So thanks so much to all our guests, Sara, Abdelgalil, Hafiz, Mohammed, and Hajooj Kuka. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.